This honorable house now resume its sitting. It is indeed a great honor and a pleasure to welcome all of you to the sitting of this honorable House of Representatives on Tuesday, October 29, 2024. I would like to extend special welcome to those who are joining us online via the various social media platforms and the PBCJ live stream. We also want to extend welcome to the four following persons who are guests today of the sitting of Parliament: Professor T. Thomas, Yale University, visiting Jamaica to conduct research into the history of Chief Tacky and his revolt; Derek Black X Robinson, walking activist calling for Chief Tacky to be declared a national hero; Lorraine McPherson, Director, Tacky Foundation; and Christine Boyd Brown accompanying Dr. Thomas. We also want to welcome Mrs. Barbara Blake Hanna, former member, former senator. Thanks. We also want to welcome Ricardo Ali Cook, former ambassador to Japan, student from the Mile Gully High School, student from the Mile Gully Primary School, student from the Oracobessa High School and Tacky High School, along with the Goshen Primary School. There are some counselors who are here or should be here. They're not here as yet. Let me also welcome Miss Sharon Hay Webster. Good afternoon, ma'am. Former member of parliament in this house. And at about 4 p.m., we will be seeing the Cuban ambassador and his team. So we extend the welcome from now. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Dr. Holness, Dr. Clarke, Dr. Chang, Miss Grange, Miss Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terrelong, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Cousins, Miss Crawford, Miss Daly, Miss Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, uh, Mr. Samuda, Matthew Samuda, right. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Sibley's, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wright.
Statement by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to have leave of the House to allow a special tribute to be done at this time in regards to a member of this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, on the 8th day of March, 2018, this House swore in a member from St. Andrew Northwestern. And although, Mr. Speaker, we don't refer to names in this House unless there is a particular requirement which you only can determine, I beg leave also for you to allow for the member's name to be mentioned in particular throughout the tributes that may flow herefrom. So on the 8th of March, then, this House swore in a member of Parliament for the constituency of St. Andrew Northwest in the personage of Dr. Nigel Clarke. And Dr. Clarke has had a remarkable run for the last 6 years as an outstanding member of this honorable House, an outstanding debater, an outstanding advocate of the people, and an excellent Minister of Finance. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, he's followed a long line of outstanding finance ministers, starting with Sir Harold Allen. Way back then, N.N. Crabnother-Soul, we recall. Sir Donald Songster, we recall. The Most Honorable Edward Seaga, we will recall. The Honorable Peter Phillips, we recall. And the latest, of course, is the Honorable Audley Shaw. During that period, Mr. Speaker, the foundation was laid. And there were other ministers of finance in the interregnum, but I mentioned those as perhaps the most notable names that come to mind very readily. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that this minister excelled himself in so many areas. And you'll permit me at a later point, if indeed we reference some of those outstanding areas of excellence that he attained. But I must say, his ascension now, Mr. Speaker, to the post of Deputy Managing Director of the Global Financial Institution of Note, the IMF, marks a pivotal chapter in the history of not only Jamaica, but the Caribbean. As never before has there been a Caribbean native to hold such a high-ranking position in the IMF. Both Jamaica and the Caribbean stand to greatly benefit from having one of our own serving in such an esteemed global position. It is small wonder that indeed, member, your outstanding performance as Minister of Finance caught the attention of the IMF, whose Managing Director, economist Kristalina Kristalina, yeah, we call it that. Yes, Kristalina Georgieva, announced on August 6th that they will join, that you, in fact, will join her team as a deputy managing director as of November 1. It is instructive that the internationally renowned economist, in her distinct native Bulgarian accent, stated that our own Nigel Clarke brings a unique perspective. First, as a minister of a country that has transformed remarkably for the better over the years since he started in his position in 2018. She added that your work ensured that it is possible to build strong institutions, to have a remarkable resilient economy, and to overcome challenges, which she argued is something that could not only benefit everybody in the membership, but especially countries struggling with similar challenges. As you turn your attention to the global financial stage, you will undoubtedly excel and become a great ambassador for the region. And you, minister, member, can bank on us to cheer you along. Jamaica is thankful for your sterling leadership of the economy, which has resulted in a number of positives during your 6-year tenure. Even your most ardent detractors, Member Clarke, and there can't be many, will agree that under your watch, the net international reserve, NIR, has been the healthiest it has ever been in the history of the nation. According to the Bank of Jamaica, Jamaica's NIR stood in fact at 5 billion at the end of August 2024. And that makes the point. You have presided over an economy which has seen the unemployment rate plummet to an unprecedented level of 4.2%. This is truly remarkable, and indeed a tremendously remarkable feat, which has resulted in most youths in our land now being employed for the first time in Jamaica. Your sterling leadership of the economy has also allowed for the government to fund a raft of infrastructural projects, such as the 45 billion Spark program, the 275 million US dollars Montague Bay Perimeter Road project, which includes construction of a Montague Bay bypass, accompanied by a comprehensive drainage study, the Barnett Street, West Green Avenue Road rehabilitation, and the Long Hill bypass, to name just a few. The economic stability of the country has also allowed the government to provide an 88% increase in minimum wage, moving from 6,200 when the JLP came to power to 15,000 today. One of your much heralded achievements, which will be etched in the taxpayers' memory, is how your fiscal policies have resulted in the nation benefiting from no imposition of taxes for several years. This is truly a historic feat. And allow me to say, Nigel, although you have worked fervently to accomplish much for the nation, you still found time to display a profound sense of humor. Still fresh in my memory, of course, and yours, is the use of the red card. In closing your 2024-25 budget debate in the House, after the declaration that despite government's claim that it had imposed no new taxes over the past several fiscal years, the taxes being collected from the Jamaican people have risen dramatically under this government. So then why should this be, and why should anyone hide it? And of course, you immediately said, of the person, you have been given a red card. There are other humorous moments, and I think that the member from the other side who isn't here at the moment, leader of the opposition, might have also memories and recollection of some very humorous banter between both of you across the floor. But this is a level of repartee, if you will, that must exist in the House. And this is a kind of response that we must find as we debate very vigorously and energetically and with great rigor various critical matters of importance to the nation, but to do it with civility and with respect and a sense of humor. And you brought that to the House in your deliberations. Mr. Speaker, we close, in fact, by just reminding this Honorable House of the important role that our Prime Minister has played, and he will speak, in enabling this young minister to excel in the way that he did, to give him the freedom and the latitude to express his creativity and to show his financial wizardry in enabling some very innovative measures to be taken. And I want to make note particularly of his stewardship during the period when the world experienced, in fact, the most existential threat in Anthropocene Earth, COVID-19. And when all economies were tumbling and capsizing, rapsizing, and downsizing, Jamaica stood solid, firm, on the steady hand of the Minister of Finance. And so we pay tribute to that level of dexterity and nimbleness that enabled us to navigate through that process, through iterations, various types of iterations. But in the end, we were able to have growth, and not just growth, but 11 consecutive quarters of economic growth, a record for any country in this area. So this graduate of Monroe College, who has excelled academically, earned a DPhil in numerical analysis from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, an MSc in applied science statistics, also from Oxford University, and a BSc in mathematics and computer science from the University of the West Indies. Yes, you, Nigel, you have displayed musical acumen as well. And I could not forget that. The youth orchestra that you founded, and this chairman of the National Youth Orchestra of Jamaica, a non-profit organization that empowers youth in the country through classical music education. And of course, as a member of the board of directors of the Youth Orchestra of the Americas. These are qualities and part of you, which is not very well known to the public, but of course is a critical foundation element that has shaped your character and enabled you to be the man that you are today. So yes, indeed, this most distinguished individual, one of the finest to have walked the halls of this chamber, today we pay tribute to you. We say bon voyage, but we also say, in the words of one of our former Governor General, as you go through the next phase of your life, happy hunting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise as the leader of government business has done to speak in tribute to the member from Northwest St. Andrew. And Mr. Speaker, let me just say at the outset that the leader of the opposition is overseas on official party business. And that's his reason for not being here today. And though I speak as leader of opposition business, the more fulsome tribute will come from the counterpart of the member from Northwest St. Andrew. Mr. Speaker, you know, as we pay tribute to the outgoing Minister of Finance and member from Northwest St. Andrew, people who observe us inside here. Some will think that this is the height of hypocrisy on our part by paying tribute, But I want to assure them that is far from the truth. We are paying genuine tribute. We are paying genuine tribute today for the member, for the member, for the member who has decided to resign from this chamber. And we pay genuine tribute in a number of respects. Firstly, the member has served our country. And all of us, when we come here to serve. We come here as representatives of the people. And it is not easy to serve. So that has to be recognized at the outset. So we want to thank the member for serving his constituency. And secondly, the member has served with distinction. We have had reasons to disagree. There's a government side, opposition side, and we have vigorous debates inside here on issues. But that notwithstanding, I think we have to recognize the high quality that the member has brought to the debate and the intellectual rigor that and you know, people believe that the other chamber has all the quality when it comes on to debate. But I think we have seen, especially in recent times, from that side and this side, the level of debate has risen, and the member can take credit for much of that. The member, despite one or two aberrations, has displayed tremendous civility and cordiality with his colleagues across the aisle. And we want to recognize that. You know, when the member was coming into these chambers, a former member from West Rural St. Andrew and a former minister of commerce called many of us on this side to say, despite the member's choice, we need to be kind to the member. And sometimes the member doesn't understand why we are so kind to him, you know, from this side, because he is from distinguished, high pedigree PNP stock. And we should.
Whether it's rebuilding our infrastructure or getting tough on homelessness, Fort Lauderdale Mayor Dean Trentalis has been a champion of progress. He's fostered economic growth, increased public safety, and improved our quality of life. Mayor Dean Trentalis, getting things done. Leadership when it counts. Dean Trentalis, your Fort Lauderdale.
He might very well come back home. But seriously, we want to pay tribute as well, pay tribute to his family, because it is not easy being in these parts and your family out there. So we want to commend and to pay tribute to your wife, to your children, and to wish them well, because I know whither thou goest, they too. And I think sometimes we fail to recognize that element of the life that we live inside here. Mr. Speaker, in closing, as I mentioned, the member from Southeast St. Andrew will be given a more fulsome presentation, but I want to, speaking personally, because we've had very good interpersonal issues, and the members have always been very kind. On our side, we have to relate to each other. So despite sometimes the furor inside here, we do take up the phone and we speak in very cordial terms with each other. And there's always been respect, and there's always been a recognition that we are all here to serve the people of our country. So we wish you well, Bon voyage. We know that you're going to represent us well. And of course, on your return, we are going to be at the airport to give you a membership application form. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. All the best.
Member from Southeastern St. Andrew. Oh, I saw him first. All right. So, member from St. James West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I rise to put on record my own words of tribute to my colleague, I couldn't help but reflect on what the member from East Kingston and Port Royal just said. I think it's important for those who are listening to understand that when we pay tribute, we choose to put aside our differences and focus on our commonalities. And once that is understood, there will be no question about hypocrisy, because we can speak sincerely when we focus on our common ground. And so whether the member earned your kind cooperation or your praise because of the stock you claim he came from, I think it's more important to focus on the fact that we are in common service of the greater good, the people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, my relationship with the honorable member from St. Andrew Northwest goes back to our days before adulthood, when we were students in high school, he at Monroe College and I at Manning School. His mother was a teacher at Manning's, and his father was the judge of the parish of Westmoreland. And in fact, the member was called Judge because everyone knew that he was the son of the sternest judge on that side of the island. Mr. Speaker, I had no doubt that the member would have risen to make a significant contribution. In fact, my mind takes me back to those young years when we would meet either around quiz or debate. And of course, we were all trying to outdo our peers by making sure it was understood in a competitive environment that we knew what we stood for and what we were aiming to contribute. So my friend Nigel, if I may, it has been a pleasure to share an allyship with you in the cabinet and here in the parliament on this side of the aisles. It has been a pleasure to work together to ensure that the government led by Prime Minister Holness delivers at a higher standard with real, impactful, and measurable results. Each of us has been assigned our own task, and some of us have to work alongside others in order for them to achieve their goals. And I've had the privilege of working across all of government and with you on many of the very difficult matters that you have delivered successfully as Minister of Finance. And I heard the member from East Kingston and Port Royal spoke about disagreements. You and I know that we have disagreed, but respectfully so, never on the what or the why, perhaps on the how and the when matters had to be delivered in a short time frame And where I sit, limited time was given for the output. But always we have worked well together, and we can be very proud of what has been accomplished. Some may not know, but I believe you do know that I have been working with the IMF and the World Bank for some years now to bring greater accountability and transparency in their work with member states, and in particular on the impact of their policies, programs, and projects. I am looking forward to a new allyship with you in that role. Kristalina spoke of the unique perspective which you bring to your prospective role. And it is my hope that that perspective will demonstrate an understanding, a real understanding of how the policies and programs of the IMF impact the people who elect us to serve them. I have no doubt that in the 80th year of Bretton Woods, as the institutions look at their impact and the challenges ahead, that you will make your own contribution. And so, as you move on to your next role, I know that the world is waiting for the unique contribution that only you can make and which we have gotten a taste of. So, my friend, I wish you well, and I will see you in Washington, D.C.
Member from Southeast St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, about 3 weeks ago, when we were closing the debate on a particular matter, I thought it was the member's final day in the House, so I began my tribute to him. Mr. Speaker, it should be no surprise that the member has chosen public service. Both his parents are nationalists who have served this country with distinction. His father in the judiciary, his mother in education, and in later becoming the first children's advocate of Jamaica. So there is no surprise that the member has chosen to devote a significant part of his life to public service. I've known him, maybe a surprise to members over here, for, 25, 30 years, and got to know him well when we were both in the UK. And this will surprise members. He lived in a house that was called Black House, shared with 4 other colleagues. And his house was the party center house in Oxford. I have a picture, which I've chosen not to share because I told him it would probably give him more ratings if I shared it, right? Of him doing some dance moves. But his wife has said all is cool and it can be shared. But we, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we formed a friendship back in the UK, and we have maintained that friendship. As I said 3 weeks ago, there's no question that the member has made a positive contribution to Jamaica's development, not just in the House, but prior to that in the Senate and the other boards on which he served. And I want to thank him for that. Thank him for all of us come here. We come here to serve. We make sacrifices, and we have to acknowledge those sacrifices as we serve. I'm not here to provide a critique or of the economic thing. No, that's not why we're here. But just to say thank you for what you have done. We wish you well as you move forward. Most importantly, I hope that your experience as a practitioner, because you are unique as someone who has dealt with the challenges of a small island developing state, that perspective can be brought to bear at the IMF, and that understanding of the challenges that we face. But best wishes as you move forward. Maintain the integrity which has never been questioned in your entire public life, and the friendship. Again, maybe a surprise, when he was entering representational politics, he picked up the phone and called me and asked me, just for some pointers on it and how to manage the constituency. But in spite of the sharp debates that we have had, the differences that we may have, there's always been that cordiality and that friendship which has maintained. And as I said, it's a distinction in terms of where you're moving towards, and we wish you well in your continued service beyond the shores of Jamaica, but for the betterment of the world and those who live in it. Thank you very much.
Member from Kingston Western.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to join in the contribution being made to someone who I have had the pleasure of working very closely with in the political arena. And since we both became members of the cabinet of Prime Minister Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, my contribution is based on the work and the results of those efforts. The Ministry of Local Government is a challenging ministry when it comes on to the question of funding and the kind of resources that is required to drive the performance of the ministry, especially the National Solid Waste Management Authority. In 2018, when we became government, the debt to the Jamaica Public Service Company at the time stood at about $6.7 billion. The government was not in a position to fulfill its obligation to the Jamaica Public Service Company. And despite the best efforts, we could not significantly reduce the outstanding amount. I approached the Most Honorable Prime Minister at the time and I shared the concerns and I said to him, this is what I would recommend once it's possible. And he said to me, you can proceed and engage the Minister of Finance. After one discussion with the minister on the issue of the outstanding arrears for the Jamaica Public Service Company, which was a strain on the country, the minister said, give him some time. And I'm pleased that the time was not long. We came back and we were able to wipe the debt of $8 billion that was owed to the Jamaica Public Service Company. And because of that, we have seen improvement in our streetlight delivery. And since then, we have been current with our obligations to the Jamaica Public Service Company, and I want to pay tribute to the Minister of Finance for being a part of that. It has been a collective response by a government to understand that teamwork is important. The other issue that I want to raise speaks to the National Solid Waste Management Authority, the premier company in the country that has responsibility for public cleansing. And that again demands the kind of support and resources to ensure that the country has an efficient and reliable source of garbage collection. While we are not fully there yet, where we want, but under his stewardship again, when I approached the Prime Minister to bare my soul with what is required to bring the National Solid Waste Management Authority up to a level that the country can say we have a source that is reliable. And when we spoke about the needs, and it's important that the country recognize the work of the Minister of Finance because he has to manage the books. In 2016, when we became government, the country had less than 6 reliable garbage trucks. Under his stewardship as Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister's maneuvering of the situation, this administration has been able to provide over 150 garbage trucks under this administration. Again, working closely with the Minister of Finance. Last thing I want to say before I take my seat. The National Solid Waste Management Authority is driven by a wide number of what we call casual workers. Some of these workers have been working at the National Solid Waste Management Authority from its inception. They had no job security. They didn't know what tomorrow will offer in terms of where they stand when they retire. Many before us retired without a pension, without getting any benefits out of the organization. And again, the Prime Minister said to me one day, boy, Minister, boy, solid waste again. When I put to him what our intentions were, he said, engage the Minister of Finance. And a commitment made by the Prime Minister in Montague Bay, made by me in this house, and made by the Minister of Finance, that we will move to make 3,800 workers at the National Solid Waste Management Authority who had no job security, no pension to get. And under his stewardship as Minister of Finance, today I am proud to say that over 3,800 Jamaicans have job security. He's not just a Minister of Finance. And the member from North Central, St. Andrew, can tell you, he used to attend St. Richard's Primary School on Red Hills Road. So he has the walk of the common man. He knows exactly what is required. And I am proud that I have been able to spend many years of working with the member in building a better Jamaica under the leadership of Dr. Prime Minister Andrew Holness. And I believe his contribution internationally is a plus for Jamaica. And it is something that money can't buy. It is something that will enhance the reputation of Jamaica, because people will see a small island state giving to the world a leader of this level. Last night when I closed at the constituency meeting, I used these words, and I'm going to close by saying, I am a proud member of the Jamaica Labour Party, proud to be associated with Dr. Nigel Clarke. And I will say to him, as I said last night, let Labour proudly walk abroad and take its place with kings. For who art Labour more than God, the maker of all things? Walk good, my friend.
Member Northwest St. James.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the current Minister of Finance spends his last day in Parliament today, I have to say my own thanks on behalf of both myself as a colleague and the members of the Jamaica Labour Party that the party joined to begin his line of public service. I don't know him as long as his friends were spoken before, but in the time I've known him, it's like I've known him for a long time. I met him, I was aware of Nigel Clarke when himself and a number of other young technocrats appeared on the scene, and himself and David Panto was seen as the outstanding professionals who would begin to bring another generation of quality public service, people across different sides of the house. But I didn't know him personally. I met him, in fact, in a bit unusual. He had taken part in actually writing the Labour Party manifesto to move from austerity to growth. And I read that thoroughly, including there was the commitment to begin to look at security. At the time I had no idea I'd be where I am today. But I met him quite peculiarly. I met him in the Prime Minister's office when we were beginning post 2016 election, the very first week. And of course, Nigel was bringing his own thoughts in terms of the technical side of government and what things that should be done. And we had a discussion. I think from the very first meeting, I found Nigel not only affable, but easy to talk to, but also had a very clear mind on issues and topics that should be dealt with by the government. He was then made chairman of National Housing Trust and the Port Authority of Jamaica. And the Prime Minister will, of course, speak to those. There are two were special agency Prime Minister, but Nigel served with distinction in those areas. And joined the electoral process in March of 2018. Started his service as a Minister of Finance, which has now looked like a short time, but is in fact 6 years plus. 6 fiscal years, almost 7 years. Much has been said, and I can add, but I won't take time to add, of the many things that Nigel Clarke has done. Those of us in the political arena saw Nigel as a successor of a series of what we consider outstanding Minister of Finance that the Labour Party has the privilege of providing this country with, starting from as far back as the first Minister of Finance, Sir Harold.
At Harbor Freight, we're committed to ensuring our tools are expertly engineered and built to last. How do we do it? First, we build state-of-the-art labs for tool development and quality assurance. Then, we rigorously test and refine our tools until we're absolutely certain they're every bit as good as other top-name brands. Our tools just happen to cost a whole lot less. So if you're looking for high-quality, long-lasting tools at an unbeatable value, look no further than Harbor Freight.
Extremely what could be considered a solid foundation to contain the process of growth. Sometimes he spoke with eloquence on the topic, but what else with many say he was also never angry, but very tough. He laid out the fiscal rules, the budget rules, what was required, and what you'd get out of it. But he was always articulate in laying out what the tough line was, but what would come out of it. And today we can look at a country that has been able to spend billions of dollars in capital investment to lay a foundation going forward. I don't want to overlap. I know the Prime Minister will speak extensively on it, but I have to. That framework, I think, was laid out by this Minister of Finance in a very easy way, but a very stringent and logical manner that has put the country on a very solid foundation. My colleagues have spoken on the benefits derived from it. I think the biggest benefit, of course, is the dramatic reduction in the debt to GDP ratio, and the next outcome of that, dramatic increase in capital expenditure with Jamaican taxpayers' money. So the things we do are Jamaican. From if I go to the west, from the perimeter road of Montague, already mentioned by my colleague, investment in international airports, etc. I could spend a good time, but I'm really here to express my thanks and gratitude to Nigel Clarke, to wish him well in the next step. When he came in, some of us always figured this would be the route. At some point, he'd go international. Didn't think he'd go this fast, actually, but in the time he has served, he has done extremely well in placing us on a solid foundation. A comment I have to express personal gratitude in the emphasis on the support he gave as we started the structure to rebuild our police force and provide the country with the kind of security infrastructure that can have an impact on the crime levels. He has taken steps not only to deal with the physical aspect, but the human aspect. Under his leadership, we have been able to expand the police force from 11,000 to 14,000 and seek to have the current establishment in place. In addition to that, we have for the first time, quite frankly, offered the police a compensation that can consider compensation. During that negotiation, we also saw the other side of Nigel Clarke. He was involved. I got involved and I was able to do the legwork of tediously going through a compensation review, which was not a salary increase. It resulted in significant salary increase. They had to get the thinking differently, and Nigel took time to outline the philosophy, the principle involved, what he was doing, and I was able to sit to the Police Federation and effectively got the change in thinking, and today we have a much more comfortable relationship, and I think officers feel much better about, at this point, the future of the Jamaica Consular Force. In addition to that, provided funding, we have retrofitted over 160 police stations, built nearly 20 new stations, have committed another 16 billion for new divisional headquarters across the country, and that expenditure continues that we expect to go through. So I had mentioned those as personal items, that I think the country needs to be reminded of the impact of his work. But let me say again, it was a privilege to have worked with you, Nigel, a pleasure to have had you, and to, in fact, feel that I did the right thing in helping to recruit you, assist my leader in pulling you into this space. And as I said, I expected that at some point you'd have headed in this direction, but I hope you're a little longer, but timing, we don't all set the time ourselves. As you move to the next level, you will, I know, carry Jamaica's persona in the space you go to, and we know you go prepared, and will continue to maintain your relationship with the country, although you've been in a new space. We wish you well there. Know you'll do well, and help not only to fix Jamaica's problems, but make a significant contribution to how international financial agencies approach the underdeveloped countries that are seeking to struggle in development. Again, thank you, Nigel Clarke, and wish you well. Godspeed.
Members, though we may want to show appreciation to the outgoing Minister of Finance because of the way he has touched many of our lives with the work that he has been doing for Jamaica, I have to stick to my list that I have had in front of me. And so we may have to send our show our appreciation and our congratulation and our words of tribute to him in another way. But I am guided by the list that is given to me. And unless I get the nod from the leader of government business, I just have to stick with the flow. And so at this time, we will take the member from St. Andrew West Central, the most Honorable Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. My friendship with, and Mr. Speaker, may I ask for the privilege of addressing the member by name?
You do have the privilege, member.
With the concurrence of the members. My friendship with Nigel is over 20 years old. And the friendship is based on clearly mutual respect, mutual interest, but also a similar outlook and a shared philosophy. We have a mind share on many issues. In fact, as younger men looking on at the challenges of the country at the time, we developed, Mr. Speaker, a kind of roadmap of solutions to the country's problems. The question was, how do we get these set of policies implemented. Mr. Speaker, the opportunities came when I became Prime Minister the first time around. It was too short-lived then to have put any of those plans into action. Nevertheless, I had the opportunity, having taken on the position of Prime Minister, to visit the IMF. And I took along with me as my special advisor at the time, Nigel Clarke. It was a profound meeting. It was about to assume the role of Prime Minister. And I went with former Prime Minister Bruce Golding as well. And I'll never forget, in that meeting with the IMF, something that was said, and I won't repeat it here, but the impact of what was said made me realize the depths of the problems that Jamaica was in. And I came back from those meetings with a very sober outlook on Jamaica's prospects. In 2013, the new Minister of Finance also went to the IMF, Dr. Peter Phillips, and he came back and made a similar statement, which was to the effect that the meeting with the IMF was very sobering. Well, though he didn't, he implemented it. The reason why I start my tribute to Nigel at this point, it's because up until then, Jamaica had a need-hate relationship with the IMF. Not a love-hate, a need-hate. We needed the IMF, but we hated the IMF. Some of you would remember a former Minister of Finance standing up in this room and saying, bye-bye, IMF. Tata, good, thank you for reminding me. Tata, IMF. And for many decades before, Jamaica's problems were sometimes blamed on the IMF. We took a different perspective, Nigel and myself. We started from the point of view that our problems are our responsibility. We have agency, and we must do what is necessary to put our country on the right track. In 2009, 2010, former Prime Minister Golding also took that view and started the first debt exchange, the first real attempt by Jamaica to address our debt crisis. By 2013, the then Finance Minister, Dr. Peter Phillips, came to that understanding as well, that we need to embrace the challenges that we have. We need to put in place the programs, but more than that, we need to own the IMF program. And so what happened in Jamaica was a shift from saying an IMF program is imposed on us to us embracing an IMF program, to the point of establishing the EPOC, the Economic Program Oversight Committee. And I want to give a very fair view of how we have reached where we are, because it is no single administration that has done it. Started under the Bruce Golding administration of 2007 to 2011, continued under the Portia Simpson Miller administration from 2011 to 2015. And it has continued through my administration. We inherited an IMF program, the Extended Fund Facility, which started in 2013. And I appointed Minister Clarke, some of you will remember, as Ambassador Plenipotentiary for Economic Affairs. It was a specific appointment to enable him to deal with our international partners, particularly the international funding agencies. And Minister Clarke worked with them directly to ensure that there was, first of all, an understanding between the government and the IMF, that trust was built, and that there was the assurance of the commitment of the government to carry through the reforms. But it was also important that he was a very good interlocutor in ensuring that the programs were also developed with Jamaica's interests at the forefront. And so we were able to end the EFF with several reviews to go, because we had excelled on those programs, on the EFF, to the point where we could graduate early. Some of you may not recall that we ended the EFF early, and in October 2016, we entered the precautionary standby agreement. That was because of the phenomenal performance of the government in meeting the various benchmarks. So when the opportunity came for Nigel to be appointed the Minister of Finance, that was embraced. And Nigel became the Minister of Finance with the mandate to accelerate the implementation of not just the IMF program, but Jamaica's program of economic reform. The things that we had discussed almost a decade before, we now had the opportunity to have those things fully executed. When we discussed these things 10 years before, the issue was always, we know what to do from a policy perspective, but will we have the political space to do it? That was always the challenge. Will we have the political space? And the political space is not only determined by the arguments in the cabinet. The political space is also determined by the people. What will the people agree to? Will they want to hear about high reserves and reduction in debt? Or do they want to hear about an increase in path or fixing roads or more water? These are the trade-offs that governments face in creating the space, the political space. So you will hear the Minister of Finance speak about the fiscal space, the revenue room to deliver. But there's also another space, the political space to implement policy and keep on track with policy. And so my commitment when I appointed Minister Clarke as a minister was that we would have the political space. My job is to make sure that the political space is there for the policies to stay on track. And what you're seeing happening now in the transformation of the Jamaican economy is the political space giving the wherewithal for policy to be implemented. And now we are seeing the dividends. Now, to implement these policies and to secure the political space, it's not an easy task because, as some persons will recall, that when governments are faced with a narrowing political space, the response is to say, run with it. It's better to be here figuring out how to solve the problem we create than to be on the outside. So run with it. That is a challenge of a tightening political space. This administration has sacrificed great political capital to ensure that the policies that will yield the long-term and medium-term benefits are implemented. So let's look at some of the things that have changed, the practical things, since you have mentioned it, remember, we have gone through 9 budgets and we have not increased taxes. Our reserves are at the highest levels they have been in decades. We have halved the national debt from 144% of GDP to now what, 74% of GDP. These are real things that have happened to transform our economy under the direction of Minister Clarke as the Minister of Finance. Minister Clarke presided over legislation to create an independent central bank. It is that independence of the central bank that has made Jamaica probably the only country in the region with a free floating exchange rate. Dr. Clarke spent quite a bit of his own time directly in the formulation of the Fiscal Commission. I think that you would call that one his baby. And the Fiscal Commission is an important institutional legacy that Dr. Clarke will leave behind, because it is the Fiscal Commission that will ensure that even if the political space has narrowed, that the policies to ensure the fiscal sustainability of Jamaica will remain. It is that institution that will take our fiscal affairs substantially out of the political domain. Dr. Clarke, Nigel, will be credited for, this is something that we should have been doing a long time ago, Nigel, but you did it. You issued the first international financial instrument denominated in Jamaican dollars. This man put Jamaican dollar that some of us disparage. He put the Jamaican dollar instrument on the international market for people to buy that instrument in Jamaican dollar. Yes, that's a legacy, historic. One of the challenges, Mr. Speaker, and I'm wrapping up shortly, but this is something that I would want every Jamaican to appreciate. Whilst the narrowing political space has led to many policy missteps and bad policies implemented, and you can go through them from FinSac to allowing government entities to run up debt, to all kinds of bad policies. What we cannot deny as well that has contributed to the stagnation of the Jamaican economy over the last 50 years is that we have been hit by natural disasters. Jamaica is vulnerable to natural disasters. And in fact, a part of the accumulation of debt is as a result of government borrowing to recover from disasters. I speak about this all the time, but I'm not certain it has filtered into the consciousness of the population. But what this administration has done is to create a new way of managing shocks, whether it is a natural disaster shock, a health shock, or any other economic shock. And that is the creation of fiscal buffers. For the first time, Jamaica is able to set aside, put aside resources. But we have also created what is commonly termed as a multi-layered risk mitigation, risk financing.
What if better was easier than you ever thought possible? If you could try something different and actually feel good about doing it? What if all you had to do was change one little thing?
The key element of that would be the issuance of the catastrophe bond. Jamaica being the first small country to successfully issue a catastrophe bond. That is the achievement of my friend Nigel. In addition to that, coming out of the IMF agreement and reflecting on the period 2011 to 2015, where not only was the private sector called upon to take haircuts and to restructure, the workers of the country were called upon to absorb wage freezes in order to prevent the country from going under. The workers of the country did that. And we both, in our conversations, have always recognized that the sacrifice of the workers must be acknowledged and rewarded. And therefore, when we came to look at how we're going to treat with the compensation of the workers, we were very favorable towards what has been asked for many administrations before but never done, a compensation review. Now, I must tell you that Dr. Clarke took that one on fully and personally, was right there with the unions, right there with the meetings, and, $200 billion later. And I want to repeat that point, that the wage bill has increased by that amount of money. Significant. I remember the minister, in one of his unique presentation styles, came here to try to show how the proportion of the wage bill has increased. I believe you came with an abacus, right? Trying to show the proportion of the wage bill. That will be an enduring legacy as well. I am not saying that it is yet perfect. There are still unfinished ends in that endeavor, which the next minister will be tasked to address. However, Mr. Speaker, Nigel also did some very practical things. Minister Vaz has asked me to convey to you, Nigel, his eternal gratitude for the support you gave in us acquiring, in short order, 275 new buses, which we will get. We have already gotten 100. Well, we have got 175, and the rest is going through the system. So, Minister Mackenzie already thanked you for the garbage trucks. But there are some other important legacies as well, which we must acknowledge. You know, the National Stadium. Built over, 50 years ago. It's the office needs some repair. And within that budget space, Minister Clarke has managed to find a solution to both the financing and the actual improvement and repair work. You will hear more about that. Minister Grange, I'm sure, will tell you more about that. But the development of the Kingston waterfront, the linear park, that will be done. Minister Clarke, working with the World Bank, we have managed to, I believe you signed the loan agreement for that. And there are many other areas, including the development of, I don't like to use the word pipeline, because things don't generally come out of the pipeline. That's what there. But we have developed a train line of public-private partnership projects. Over $2 billion of public-private partnership projects to come, including the expansion of the North-South Highway, the North Coast Highway, and some other major infrastructure projects. You know, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that Nigel is a special resource for Jamaica, that he has served with great dignity, poise, and confidence. He was described, the description was meant to be derogatory, but one member called him black royalty. Meant to be, you know, derogatory. But I believe he captured the essence of the man. And I'm very pleased to have been associated with you, Nigel. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to work with you to get all of what we have accomplished done. I don't believe 90% of the people understand what we have done. It is going to take decades to truly understand. There are many books that we have to write to explain how we sat and talked about what we need to change in Jamaica, what we need to do, and to plan it so that it has happened seamlessly, without disruption. Ministers of finance and prime ministers have to work very closely together, because there will always be opportunity for people to take the action of the Minister of Finance and try to turn it into a problem for the Prime Minister. But that could never happen between us because we have a very close friendship, but more importantly, a passion for the vision of improving Jamaica. But I've always known that Nigel's skills and his service is not always going to be local in focus. There are other countries that need to benefit from the experience of Jamaica. And it is indeed a distinct honor that that skill resided with us, and we now give that skill to the world. So, Mr. Speaker, we now embark on a new phase. What Minister Clarke and I had defined to do, I believe we have largely accomplished it. Now, we have discussed this other phase as well, and we have a plan, and you will see that plan being rolled out in the next term. Now and next term. In the same way, we have transformed the fiscal arrangements. Now, Mr. Speaker, we are going to take the dividends and benefits of that and transform the human resources, the productivity, and the peace and security of the country to finally complete the mission of prosperity for the Jamaican people. I wish my friend Nigel all the best in his endeavors, and I'm certain that his particular skill sets will always be available to the people of Jamaica. God bless you, and good speed on your journey.
At this time, we will take the reply from the member from Northwestern St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, my heart is full. Though, Mr. Speaker, you have your constituents and neighbors and friends, but it's a completely different thing when it comes to your peers and, of course, your leader. I first want to just express my sincere gratitude and thanks to you first as the leader of this chamber, and to your substantive speaker, to the House Leader and the Leader of Opposition Business, and above all, Mr. Speaker, I want to express thanks to the Prime Minister, my cabinet colleagues, and my parliamentary colleagues. As the Prime Minister mentioned, our relationship goes back to the late 1990s when I first returned from studying and working abroad. And he had been a member of parliament for 2 years. I followed closely his election from the UK, where I was at the time a graduate student. All three of them, and I wondered, who is this guy? Anyway, I was fortunate when I came back in 1999 to meet Andrew. he was the only parliamentarian member of a small group of people who used to meet on a regular basis to talk about Jamaica and to envision a possible future. And one thing, if you don't know anything about Andrew Holness, one thing that you must know is that he is a persistent person. Because from then, he was trying to get me to come and do what he is doing. I'll never forget the going to his constituency with my wife. I was just married, like not even 1 or 2 months. And he invited me to speak at an event in at Tower Hill, exactly, the school. And I went and I gave a presentation, and my wife came back and said, Nigel, you know, not right now. Not right now. But he never gave up. Every couple of years, there'd be another invitation. And I kept on saying no. Like, why don't you serve on my constituency executive? I said, no, I'm focused. If I'm going to get into this thing, I have to have a foundation. Let me focus on what I'm doing. And I must tell you, there were many no's before my first venture, which was to join the Senate. And that was an amazing experience for me. I gained a tremendous amount of respect for Jamaica's arrangements. And with the fact that what I described is that Jamaica has, you know, DNA of an entity tells you what the entity can be. But when you see the DNA at birth, you can't distinguish the DNA of an ant from the DNA of an elephant with the naked eye. But the DNA of an elephant will become an elephant. The DNA of an ant will remain an ant. Well, I like to say my exposure to the Senate back in that 2013 period taught me that Jamaica has elephant DNA. This is a country with the structures, with the constitutional arrangements, with the social cohesion and framework that can go much further than we are today, i.e. the same chassis, the same DNA can take us all the way. This is a country built for much more than we already have. The Prime Minister mentions when he asked me to accompany him to Washington, D.C., when he was about to be Prime Minister, and Prime Minister Golding invited him to meet the heads of those agencies, and I accompanied him. I was quiet in all of those meetings. Yes, absolutely. And it was really shocking. And the Prime Minister was so seized when he came back. He spoke to a 30,000 gathering in Mandeville, and the rest of that is history. But history will record that he told the people of Jamaica the truth. So even though it might be hard to believe today, I much preferred working and supporting in the background due to Andrew Holness. And because of Andrew Holness,
On. Welcome to the first ever basketball game held at the famous Treehouse Basketball Court. And now, get ready for the ball
Tend to be your most productive years and your early 50s. And to devote that to Project Jamaica has been the privilege of my life. And I thank Prime Minister Holness for the opportunity. It has been a wonderful journey, and we have accomplished a lot with the parliamentary and the cabinet team together. Now, it's very important to acknowledge that the best achievements, the sweetest ones, are the collaborative ones. And there's nothing I've enjoyed more by collaborating with my colleagues in the cabinet to pursue their policy priorities and to make them a reality. And the role of the Minister of Finance, as practiced in our time, has been an enabler of others. And that often requires, because the capital budget is really the discretionary part of our affairs, and it requires some backward integration. And so what Minister Vaz spoke about and Minister Mackenzie spoke about, and what was spoken about with Minister Grange and the stadium, and the hospitals with Minister Tufton, and the school improvement project with Minister Williams, and national security with DPM, have been tremendously fulfilling endeavors to pursue. Now, Prime Minister and colleagues, Jamaica enjoys hard-won economic stability, something that we have not had in our country for the better part of 45 years. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when we had it, but it's certainly sometime over the last, say, sort of maybe right before COVID, when we regained stability. And we certainly know when we lost it, and that would have been about 5 decades ago, approximately. And with the anchor of that stability is that Jamaica's debt today, in this fiscal year, we are 7 months in the fiscal year, and by the end of the fiscal year, we're expecting our debt to be in the high 60s, i.e. at 68%, which and that will be the lowest since the mid-1970s. So Jamaica has earned for herself the possibility of a new beginning, and one that we must use wisely. We have today, as Prime Minister mentioned, more sources of people wanting to lend to us than we could possibly take. And it's just a rule of life. People want to lend to people who don't need money because their chances of being repaid are better. So I want to say to ministers of finance who follow, don't be impressed by the many offers that you're going to get to lend you money. I have had that too. But what we have to work on for the next phase is to ensure that, having gotten our debt down, we want to change the composition of that debt from a majority US dollar debt to make it into more Jamaican dollar debt. so though we might be at 68% at the end of the year, we still have 60% of that amount denominated in US dollars, which is a source of risk. Now, because we're in a position where we can demand what we want, my posture has been, everybody want to lend me money. I said, look, you come to me with Jamaican dollars, I'll borrow from you. You can't possibly get all the Jamaican dollars you need in a local market. And so for 4 years in a row or 5 years in a row, I would say to, when I go to DC or New York, say to all the bankers who want to do business with us, come to me with a J dollar deal and you will have a deal. And because of that, as the Prime Minister mentioned, last year we had the first issue of a local currency bond internationally. And I hope and I know that Prime Minister Holness and the team will build on that and we'll have more issues of Jamaican dollar instruments. Now, the important thing, Mr. Speaker, about economic stability, I want to say there's three important things about it. One is that it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all of our problems. It can't. But you cannot solve our problems sustainably without it. Economic stability is not anyone's enemy. It is the friend of every noble social and economic objective that you want to sustain over time. But keeping it, Mr. Speaker, is not an inevitability. As much success as we have had, the path ahead does not allow for policy error because Jamaica's finances are so rigid and tight. And so, Mr. Speaker, it can be maintained by the choices that we make, and choices that consider today as well as tomorrow, and importantly, choices that leave enough space for public investment. It's only through public investment that we can improve quality of life. This administration, more than any other administration in the recent past, has addressed the income question. If you think about it, first of all, macro income per capita GDP in US dollar terms has gone up from around 5,000 plus US dollars to 7,000 US dollars on a macro basis. You go more granular, the minimum wage in nominal Jamaican dollar terms has gone from 6,200 to 15,000, an increase of 260%. In US dollar terms, an increase of 88%. And adjusted for inflation, an increase in real terms of 56%. So we have addressed and are addressing the income question. When you look at NIS, NIS has increased from between 26 and 70, I believe it's in the mid-70s, 75% or thereabouts. We have introduced a social pension and increased it by over 40%. The public sector compensation has increased salaries to public sector workers. We have employed 1.5 and 1.7 thresholds that have increased disposable income. So more than any other administration in the recent past, this administration has addressed the income question. But what we have learned is that income, though necessary, is not sufficient, particularly for a country where many are on low incomes. The only way to sustainably, if we focus on income alone, we will not improve quality of life. Because when you are at an income level of $12,000 a week, moving it to $14,000 a week, though a big movement, does not transform a life. What transforms lives are public investments that improve the quality of public services. And which is why I've been such a fervent believer and I've worked so assiduously on the buses, on the garbage trucks, on the stadium, on the hospitals, on the parks, on the parks, right? On the fire station, fire truck.
You're giving too much of the strategy.
Okay, all right, yeah, all right, all right. So, Mr. Speaker, let me talk about the past. I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, that, and I hope you'll permit me on this occasion, not to be followed by any other occasion, certainly from me, to say that I'm proud to have been a part of an administration and to have led a ministry with a strong record of performance. Mr. Speaker, we promised recovery from the pandemic, a stronger recovery, and Mr. Speaker, we have delivered recovery in jobs, recovery in output beyond pre-COVID levels. Mr. Speaker, we have redefined access to tertiary education with no guarantor requirement for student loans. Mr. Speaker, some of the nuggets are the ones that are most interesting. Paternity leave in the public sector is a reality.
Leave things better than you found them. That's the lesson I learned growing up, and that's what I'm teaching my boys. I'm Jason Pizzo, and I'm guided by that same principle today. As your state senator, I actually helped reduce our insurance costs. I got law enforcement the tools they need to keep us all safe and secured funding for our infrastructure to build our future, Florida's future, and leave our state better than we found it, because that's what we deserve.
Process, and importantly, all procurement today is electronically done. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, I thank the Prime Minister, and I thank this honorable House for the opportunity to have served. I thank the members on the other side for being worthy opponents and for working on behalf of the Jamaican people in holding the government to account. We thank you for doing so, for the most part, in a spirit of collegiality and with, the people don't understand on the outside the underlying friendships that either pre-exist or develop in this chamber. In closing, Mr. Speaker, in making my departure from not just the playing field, but from the stadium, mixing my metaphors a little bit, I have run through the tape. Some people, you see the finish, your particular finish line, and you ease up. And it's all right, the finish line, we must ease up. People thought that when they heard August 26th, when the announcement come, oh, Nigel going to ease up, oh, or that you're going to go off on some big holiday for 3 weeks. That is not how the government of Andrew Holness works. We believe in running through the tape and running through the finish line. That's what I've tried to do. So, Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of running through the tape, I just have the 3 updates that I'd like that are relevant. The first is that the Independent Fiscal Commission comes into effect on January 1st, 2025. That was always a timetable. There's a timetable that doesn't change because the minister changes. The commissioner, as the Prime Minister mentioned, was appointed in May of 2023, and it's taken this time for his office to get up to speed. The Fiscal Commission becomes the independent arbiter of Jamaica's fiscal rules, takes over from the Auditor General, and will be, what we have done is to institutionalize our experience of having domestic oversight. They'll have a fiscal advisory committee, which similar to what we had in EPOC, and that's going to be chaired by Mr. Keith Duncan. It will have Mrs. Helene Davis White representing union, from the union movement, Ms. Nancy Pinchas from civil society, Dr. Patrice Whiteley from academia, who's head of economics department at UWI, and Mr. Kareem Tomlinson from the private sector. He happens to be an executive at Grace Kennedy. The Governor General made these appointments in accordance with the legislative requirements, where there was consultation between myself and the opposition spokesperson on finance. The second update, Mr. Speaker, is to say that the request for applications for an approved integrated resort development order for the parish of St. James is going to be in the newspapers tomorrow. Information will be available on the website, and the process for that integrated resort development will reopen tomorrow, and I expect that you will have some competitive bids. And then the third, Mr. Speaker, update is that the reverse income tax credit, as at Monday, we had 260,976 successful applications. And this week, Mr. Speaker, we're expecting 77,000 Jamaicans to be in receipt of an SMS or an email indicating that their reverse income tax credit will be at their financial institution or remittance agency.
And that is not from oil revenue.
No. Mr. Speaker, it's important that everyone doesn't rush to their remittance entity. You have to wait. Only persons who receive the SMS and the email, and there'll be 77,000 of those this week. The remaining amounts of the reverse income tax credit will be paid in November and December. If you go to a remittance company to collect, you have to have a valid government ID, a passport, driver's license, or a voter ID. If you're a person with disability, you can authorize someone to collect with a letter signed by a JP, which has your application reference number, your TRN, the beneficiary ID, and other information. Mr. Speaker, running through the tape. Running through the tape, Mr. Speaker. It's been a privilege and honor of my life, and I thank you, and I thank the Prime Minister. Thank my colleagues.
Members, though we wish to be in a party mood at this time, we still have the business of the House to continue with. And for the last time, the member from St. Andrew Northwest have taken his final bow in the House of Parliament. Statement by Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we Mr. Speaker, it has been a long afternoon, and we do have some students here all the way from St. Mary and Manchester. And we really were hoping that they would have been able to leave the chambers at 4 o'clock. And so I'm going to move that we suspend the items on the order paper up to the state of the constituency debate, and to move that the state of the constituency debate be resumed, and that the first speaker would be the member from St. Mary Western, and it will be followed by the member from Manchester Northwest, and then we will revert to the standing orders. May it please you, just in order to facilitate the students who are here from those respective constituencies. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, the request is on the floor for the suspension of the standing order to take the continuation of the state of constituency debates. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it. Statement by ministers, announcements, bill brought from the Senate, petition, papers, report from committees, notice of motion given orally, question and answers to question, motion that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motion relating to the sitting of the House, motion for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business. Member? St. Mary, Western.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me thank my colleagues as well. Mr. Speaker, let me first of all thank all the members of staff of the Parliament and yourself for the steadfast management of the House and the keen attention to detail. Permit me to thank my colleagues on both sides of the House for their advice and sharing of knowledge. I want to express my gratitude to my administrative and personal staff who have worked tirelessly at my side, including my security team led by Sergeant Cleve Malcolm, who is currently off on a promotional course, and I wish him all the very best. I must mention Mr. Ralston McKinley, aka Stouty, for his safe handling of the motor vehicle, and he has proven time and time again that he is the best driver in the world. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to say a special thank you to Ms. Leng, my longest serving assistant, and she has been with me since 2003, some 21 long years. And thank you, Ms. Leng, for your kindness, patience, and service. Mr. Speaker, permission to speak from a seat other than my own.
You may continue.
Thank you, sir. Let me also acknowledge the students from the Taki High School, the Arokopesa High, as well as St. Mary High, the Goshen Primary School, who are all with me today. And I must also acknowledge the members of the Taki Foundation, including our visiting professor from Yale University. Mr. Speaker, the greatest set of workers anywhere are those from Western St. Mary. And also my management team, supervisors, I thank you. I give God thanks every day for blessing me with the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of serving the people and citizens
of the best constituency in the world, Western St. Mary. Mr. Speaker, the state of Western St. Mary is good and will be better once the Greater Mason Hall Water Project is completed. This project was committed years ago, but finally we see the work being done. Phase 1 is well on track, and the citizens of Mason Hall will see piped potable water for the first time in history. As a result, improved water supply will be felt in Canopon, Days Mountain, and Barriff Hall. In phase 2, which has started, there will be upgrades to the water treatment plants in Pottinger Spring, White River, and Bogue. Therefore, improved water flows will be felt in Tower Isle, Rio Nuevo, Boscobel, Stewarttown, Huddersfield, Mango Valley, Rocobessa, Wentworth, Villa Road, Galena, and all communities leading off the North Coast Highway straight into Port Maria. It will also see water going for the very first time into the communities of Kidland and Lookout. This is a transformational project. This government and this MP will be delivering water to the people. But it's not only there, Mr. Speaker. The then Minister, the Honorable Senator Matthew Samuda, approved the project of laying a 6-inch pipeline from the White River treatment plant through Labyrinth straight into the town of Gale, so that the people of Hyathill, Richards Pen, Gale, Coombstown, Saltram, and all adjoining communities will no longer have any shortage of water for many, many years to come. A solar-powered 15-horsepower pump is being installed in Mile Gully as we speak. And I want to thank the Stanford family from Mile Gully for making the lands available. A solar pump is also slated for Brockway. The rural water company is to establish a new water system at Falling Spring in Springfield, so that the people of Springfield and Windsor Castle can be removed from the Geisel system, and thereafter Waterford and Heartlands will see improved water supplies. These communities, Mr. Speaker, have suffered long enough, and a solution is at hand. And yes, Mr. Speaker, this is what we refer to as shared prosperity. Mr. Speaker, 350,000 gallon tank will be bought and placed in Geisel. And along with the 100,000 gallon tank that is currently in Morris Hill, we will have the ability to store the water that will be coming up as a result of an agreement with the National Irrigation Commission, NIC, and the NWC. Minister Green has already given permission for 1 million gallons of water per day to be sent from the Rio Magna up to the Geisel treatment plant. And thereafter, sections of Northeast St. Catherine, Southeast St. Anne, and the communities of Decoy, Maidenhall, Top Road, Jeffreytown, Waterford, Kubicana, Old Road, Cox Peace, and Heartlands will see a massive improvement in their water supplies. The Petersfield system will be upgraded as new pipes will be laid, and a new solar pump is slated for the Comma Spring. The Champagne Spring in Jackson is slated for another solar pump, and the Fellowship Hall and Ramble Springs will be upgraded. A new pipeline is planned from Sandhill to Port Maria to replace the old encrusted one that is there. So Sandhill, Crescent, Geddestown, Oxford, Carpees Road, Baileysville, and Freehill will see better and more consistent water supplies. Mr. Speaker, this is what we call shared prosperity. The Industry Pen project by the National Housing Trust will see the Emancipation Lands project finally being completed. Mr. Speaker, when this project was started, certain infrastructural improvements were promised to the people when they were investing, and it never happened. But Dr. Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, committed to the people of Industry Pen, and the NHT will be spending the funds for a new sewage system, improved water supplies, roads, electricity, and land titles. A development by others with over 900 homes were never completed, but this government will be completing it for the benefit of the people. This project will not only benefit Industry Pen, but the wider Three Hills community, Petersfield, Roscommon, Charlestown. Mr. Speaker, the most honorable Prime Minister is continuing to share the prosperity because he has instructed the National Land Agency to transfer 31 acres of land being held by the Airports Authority of Jamaica into the name of the Factories Corporation of Jamaica for the establishment of a special economic zone and urban center for St. Mary. This is situated south of the Ian Fleming International Airport. This project, which has seen lands being cleared so that the architect can finalize the designs and the necessary geotechnical tests can be fast-tracked, the plan draws on the unique opportunities that having an international airport next door gives. So a business processing facility to do data entry for legal, medical, and technological back office works, a commercial center to house restaurants, banks, stores, government offices, etc., warehouses, factories, aircraft hangars, factory outlets, and a new terminal building, as well as a medical facility will be accommodated. So far, Mr. Speaker, it is estimated that this area will be employing some 2,500 Jamaicans. Yes, Mr. Speaker, 2,500 jobs. And if it is left to me alone, Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of them will come from St. Mary. And that is why we have a partnership with Hard Trust to train and certify our people into data entry, construction skills, office management, IT, and other hospitality skills. We have started with over 200 trainees in Gale, and we'll be opening another center in Montague soon, then Windsor Castle, Boscobel, Galena, and Valley Bush. Hart is currently doing a series of on-the-job certifications in the area so that those who will be employed in the construction will be certified by Hart. So far, they have certified over 100 persons in various construction skills. Mr. Speaker, this project is good for everybody. More places will be available for rent. More people will be traveling, so more income for the bus and taxi operators. More people will be working, so the bars, nightclubs, barbers, hairdressers, cook shops, restaurants, vendors will benefit. More economic activities mean the whole region will be uplifted. The hardware store will sell more. More people with new incomes will build houses or will add to what they have. Property values will increase. Mr. Speaker, some of our schools were damaged by Hurricane Beryl. And after a quick appeal to our hardworking Minister of Education, she responded, and she responded in a meaningful way. So that the Carrinal High School, the Carrinal Primary School, the Carrinal Infant School, Free Hill Primary School, Taki High, Campus 1 and 2, Ramble, Retreat, Derry Primary School could be opened in time for the new school year. Mr. Speaker, the Goshen Primary School got a new canteen, fencing, and a facelift, and the students love it. But Mr. Speaker, Minister Williams never stopped there. She has also written to tell me that my pleas over the years have been heard, and that the Arokobesa High School will be getting 8 new classrooms, an auditorium, staff room, offices, chemistry, biology, and agricultural labs, a multi-purpose court, a sewage system, fencing, and a solar system. Some $49 million is currently being spent on designs and tests and pre-approvals. Mr. Speaker, she never stopped there. She went on to say that at the Arokobesa Primary School, they will get a new block of 20 new classes.
In Ohio, a 10-year-old girl was raped and became pregnant, but a state abortion ban prevented her from getting the care she needed. Under Florida's current near-total abortion ban, that could happen here, too. That's why we must vote yes on Amendment 4.
Primary School. The 20 old NAC buildings that Brother Paul is well aware of will be knocked down. And Mr. Speaker, some $60 million is being spent on designs, surveys, tests, and approvals. But we're not finished, because the Iona High School will be seeing a massive expansion. 4 new classrooms, an auditorium, staff rooms, 4 new labs, sewage system, disability ramps, fencing, and a solar system, because they're spending some $45 million on pre-investment work. But if you think we've stopped there, we don't stop there. Because the Taki High School will be expanded when we complete the purchase of additional lands next door to move the school from 2 campuses to 1 campus. Build more classrooms, a staff room, labs, and offices. And the Sports Development Foundation has committed to building a gym and improving the playing field at Taki. But Mr. Speaker, the best gift in my political career for education has been given to me by Minister Williams. And however, this gift is the construction of a new school to replace one that was destroyed by fire many years ago and was converted to a container school. And today, some $30 million is being spent on pre-investment activities to build a new primary school for Jeffreytown in St. Mary. It has been a long wait for the people of Jeffreytown, and we want to thank Minister Williams. The funding for all these school projects have gone through the public investment system and will be included in the next budget for work to start in 2025. Test, pre-investment activities and consultations are currently ongoing. We want to thank you, Minister Favour Williams, for sharing the prosperity. Mr. Speaker, St. Mary is a tourism parish as well as an agricultural parish, but Western St. Mary is a tourism constituency. And I am pleased to inform you that Minister Bartlett has heard our cry, and the Tourism Enhancement Fund will be building 2 new public beaches, one in Resumption and one in Arokobesa, with world-class facilities to include changing rooms, lifeguard stations, picnic areas, shops, and a performing stage. All the designs are done. The consultations are done. The permits are on track for approval. And we want to start building out these in the next financial year. Access by our people to quality beaches is important. Mr. Speaker, we have some of the worst roads in Jamaica, if not the worst set of roads. And we are anxiously awaiting the start of the REACH and SPARK programs. The people of Western St. Mary cannot wait for these programs to start. Other people have a little bad road here and a little bad road there. We have so bad road. No, Western.
Mr. Speaker, the member's time having been expired, I beg to move that it be extended by 10 minutes to allow him to complete his presentation. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
The request is on the floor for the extension of the time. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes of it. Member, you may continue. Mike.
Thank you, my dear colleague. Mr. Speaker, I ask, however, one particular community for continued patience, Mango Valley. And I apologize to them for the long drawn-out procurement process. But we are making sure no questions are asked. And Minister Nestor Morgan has publicly stated that some work will start soon on the Mango Valley Fellowship Hall Road. And we humbly ask for the community's continued patience. The Mango Valley Road is not being funded under SPARK. It is a separate program. It has its separate funding. But we have to just proceed with the procurement process. Mr. Speaker, the provision of houses and housing solutions will be done with a new 300 solution housing scheme in Galena, upgrading of the Huddersfield views, extending water pipes and Gully Road up into Boscobel views, and completing the provision of water for the Eden Park housing scheme in Jacks River that was built years ago without any pipe in the scheme. And this government is going to put in the pipes. the upgrading of the Lighthouse Road Housing Project and the issuing of titles, upgrading the hills of Spicy Grove by putting in proper water supplies, a retaining wall and a roadway. And we are currently in negotiations with the family to purchase the Gardner lands in Arokobesa so the people who live there can get a title and security of tenure. We are currently looking at lands in Decoy, Salisbury, Jacks River, and Labyrinth for establishing new housing schemes, and these plans are far advanced. Housing and titles for our people is a priority of the Andrew Holness administration, and we intend to fulfill those. With regards to healthcare, we have seen the National Health Fund and Dr. Christopher Tufton responding to us in St. Mary with improvements at the Carron Hall, Mason Hall, Gale, Wood Park, and Arokobesa clinics. The Oxford Clinic in Freehill, like the Retreat Clinic, is being expanded and upgraded. Improvement work is set for Jeffreytown, Bonnygate, and the Fellowship Hall clinics. And there's a special program for upgrading the Wood Park Clinic, which is the old Claude Stewart Maternity Center. The Hunstone Clinic will be relocated to a new clinic, which is to be built in top pen on lands being donated by the Allen family. The legal transfers are being worked out. I wish to thank Minister Green and Minister Charles for the very robust response in sharing the prosperity after the passage of Hurricane Beryl. Let me thank all the shelter managers, neighbors, and friends, the JPS, the NWC, the Municipal Corporation, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and all other agencies and teams for their service. Minister Green, the Carron Hall and Arokobesa High Schools have been consistently top performers in CXC agriculture. And I want to invite you, Minister Green, to visit these schools and carry a little gift. Because we hear that you have a hydroponics program going, and Arokobesa will do well with that, and Carron Hall will do well with that little tractor. I want to thank Minister Mackenzie for the provision of that indigent house for Mr. Reddy in Gale. And Auntie Babsy, thank you for the support in the mini stadium in Arokobesa and the gym for Taki. But you know, we're still looking for the $5 million to complete the stadium. I want to thank Dr. Chang for getting the Arokobesa Police Barracks project back on track. And thanks for the promised vehicle dock. And we are looking forward to the promised expansion of Jamaica Eye program into St. Mary. Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend Minister Vaz and the Most Honorable Prime Minister for being bold enough to act on a call I have been making from 2014 and repeated it in the last debate for Jamaica to examine nuclear energy as an alternative source for our needs. The signing of the MOU recently clearly says this government listens, this government cares, and then this government acts. I want to thank you, Minister Vaz. And while we are at it, Minister Vaz, may I recommend that a new industrial port for the establishment of a new industrial port between Arokobesa and Galena be examined. I also wish to thank Minister Clarke for the reverse tax credit program. And this payback to our taxpayers earning less than $3 million is to be commended. After a big readjustment in salaries for public sector workers, offering permanent positions to thousands of contract workers, no new net taxes for over 8 years, we have managed the economy so well that we can give back some of the taxes to our people. This is shared prosperity. But, Mr. Speaker, I would wish for the government to go further. I would like to propose a program known as the SHARE program, a program to bring more people and communities together and sharing the fruits of their sacrifices over the years. A program to give the poor and vulnerable a start, to give them hope, and to allow them to carve a way forward by their own sweat and efforts. Sports, housing and health, agriculture, rural development and employment, share. I am proposing a $15 billion program to be shared evenly across constituencies for the upliftment of the poor and the vulnerable, creating opportunities for people, and finally bringing light and water to every nook and cranny of Jamaica. We have always asked the poor to sacrifice, to band them belly, to hold strain, to cut back. Well, let us start investing in the poor now. Let us give them a chance, an opportunity to share the prosperity they have waited long enough. Let me quickly point out that by spreading this money over the year and across Jamaica, the effect on inflation of this investment will be negligible, but the effect on revenues will be immense. In sports, I'm asking for $2 million per constituency to be spent on community playing fields, but at least one high school should be included, and this can be funded by the Chase Fund and Sports Development Foundation. Under health, $3 million to be allocated to each constituency to help people with prescription drugs, glasses, medical items, and equipment to be funded by the National Health Fund, and a housing grant of $5 million per constituency to be funded by the uncollected NHT returns and the housing fund. For agriculture, some $4 million to be granted for agricultural startup enterprises or expansion of existing ones that will see at least one new person being employed or new technology being transferred with emphasis on youth and women. Under the rural development, $2 billion to be shared equally for rural water and rural light, and to have at least one solar-powered water system to be done per rural constituency, and to provide electricity to rural communities once and for all, and to use solar or wind technologies for hard-to-reach communities. Under employment, each MP should be asked to recommend 200 participants in a one-year program of employment and training and paying them $20,000 per week. And we need to invite all government agencies and ministries to come forward to see how many trainees they can take and how much they can contribute. Persons to be recommended should be from the age 18 to 55 years old, and to give older persons a chance to retool or to get a job and to create opportunities and experience for the young. We have all shared the hardships and the sacrifices. Now let us share the prosperity. The Bauxite Levy Fund, how can we fund this? The Bauxite Levy Fund is owed over US $30 million. Half of that should be committed to this program and the other half into a well fund. Government entities have billions of dollars in fixed deposits. It's poor people's money being held in trust. We don't have to use it all, but some can be invested in the poor. Mr. Speaker, I would like to use this opportunity once again to call for Chief Taki to be made into a national hero. It was this mighty chief who stood up and not only spoke out against the ills of slavery, but acted. He led his people and made a stance for a country to be led by them, for them, and their children. Black X is here with me. He has championed this call with his many walks, and I would wish to see this honor bestowed on Chief Taki before Black X departs this land. I know he's not 100% well, and I want to wish you all the best and get well soon, Black X. Let us hope that the commission will be established soon and this honor bestowed upon Chief Taki before the next National Heroes Day. In the same vein, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs must redouble its efforts to have placed before President Biden a request for a presidential pardon for His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Let us do what we must to get this document before President Biden before the end of January. I am calling on the new finance minister, whoever that is, to make completing the final fixed FENSAC report a priority. We as a party campaigned on it, we placed it in our manifesto, and as a team and as a party and a government, we must fulfill that commitment. Mr. Speaker, the College of Agriculture, Science and Education, a very unique institution that is in Portland. I happen to be a past student and was one of the pioneer students. That act needs to be amended so that a permanent space can be made for an alumni representative on the Board of Governors. It is the only tertiary institution that does not have that provision. And Mr. Speaker, I am saddened by the recent multi and mass killings in our country. The gains made in the fight against crime must be protected, and it can be protected if we reintroduce hanging. We must have no pity on these worthless criminals. We must have pity on the victims and their families. Let us hang them, and some people say hang them. But whether you hang them or you hang them, as long as they are dead, dead, and them teeth killed, and varnished truth, hanging must be reintroduced without delay. It is the only real deterrent to murder in Jamaica. And the Firearms Act must be amended to make it easier for law-abiding Jamaicans to get a gun license. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, no one can deny that this government has performed and has performed admirably. We have brought down the debt to GDP from over 140% to less than 70%. We have cut all major categories of crime. We have record international reserves, annual increase in tourist arrivals, expansion of businesses, the largest ever increase for public servants, thus increasing the middle class, record agricultural output, increased access to water and student loans, hard training up to an associate degree is free. We are building 4 new hospitals, the lowest unemployment rate in our history, issuing more land titles, making it easier to invest and introduce the social pension program for the elderly. No one can deny that the people have sacrificed, that they have suffered, and this government hears the cry of the people, and that is why we have increased the path payments, giving back taxes, and we are now ready to share our common prosperity with the poor and vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, we in Western St. Mary believe that prosperity is not only for some, it is for all, and that is why it must be shared. This government, this caring government, this Andrew Holness-led government works night and day in the interest of our fellow citizens, so that Jamaica may increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, if it's so pleasing to you. Thank you.
Member from Northwest Manchester.
Mr. Speaker, there are some guests of the member from Northwest St. Andrews, some students from the constituency.
Northwest Manchester.
At TD Bank, we see millions of transactions, but it's the humans behind them that matter most. It's why we're leaders, with guidance and solutions that put people at the center. That's how every TD employee helps make our bank the greet you and your dog by your name, open longer when you need us kind of place. Because believing people matter most is how we're making banking unexpectedly human.
Of time, because we really do have a very long program ahead of us. So, yes. And we really, Minister Tufton, for example, is, yes, and he should have spoken from statement by minister. So,
Member?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to participate in another of the constituency debates. This will most likely be our last before the next general elections. Because of God's grace, I am standing here as a member of parliament of the great constituency of Northwest Manchester. I have been a part of them for the past 15 years. They have seen my daughters grow from little girls to young women and been a part of my highs and lows. And the good part is that we have never been separated. Just want to say to my constituents, I love you, Northwest Manchester. So Speaker, I want to thank my family for believing in me and following me and allowing me to serve. It has not been easy, yet they continue to be my rock. To say a big thank you to my family. Coming out of the local government elections of February 2024, Northwest Manchester made the best choice. They elected 4 councillors. With God's grace, we'll give the best representation. 3 are first-term councillors, namely Andrew Smith, the New Green Division, Devon Wilson, Johns Hall Division, and Ryan Peart, Spur Tree Division, and Councillor Rowan Kennedy, our Deputy Mayor, returned for a 2nd term. They have their work cut out for them, and I know they all are up to the task. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my assistant, Latoya, Constituency Secretary, Hopeton McCarthy, Constituency Executive, Divisional Executives, my driver, Alden, who has been driving for me for the last 15 years, and my campaign team. Your work and support have not gone unnoticed. I am strong because of you. Every year, Mr. Speaker, we are asked to participate in this debate. While most may boast about what REACH and Spark will do, or how many back-to-school benefits they have issued, our constituents elected us to perform on their behalf, and our constituents will score our performance at each election cycle. What you will not hear from many of those who participate in this debate is how the so-called prosperity has eluded their constituents and constituencies. The challenges of getting things done for major projects, even small ones too, and how difficult it has become to perform our roles to even provide the basic services. As a speaker, I want to pause to welcome the students from Mile Gully Primary School and Mile Gully High School and their teachers. The Speaker, the original purpose of these debates was for us to showcase some of our work done and advocate on our constituents' behalf. We hope that the various ministers and agencies will hear our plea and make our advocacy take our advocacy into consideration when crafting their budget for the next financial year. I will raise a few issues that have affected my constituency. Mr. Speaker, we say that to be a prosperous nation, we need an educated society. One of the most vexing issues is our educational facilities and their infrastructure, mainly the Mile Gully High School and the condition of our primary schools across the constituency. Mr. Speaker, I am sorry that the Minister of Education has left the chamber. But in 2024, I too, in 2014, after making representation to Windalco Bauxite Company, we were able to get access to 40 acres of land near the current school plant. for a new home for the Mile Gully High School. We have had every Minister of Education, from Ronald Thwaites to this current Minister of Education, visit the physical school plant and visit the proposed new site. The Ministry of Education has confirmed that they do have in possession the 40 acres of land that has been given by Windalco. I cannot count the number of times I have heard in sectoral presentations that the process of building a new high school will begin in that financial year. Well, Mr. Speaker, we are still nowhere near that reality. And Mr. Speaker, to hear the member from Western St. Mary, I won't say that I am jealous. No, I am jealous. I am jealous. It matters not, you have been in power for 8 years. So, right? But Mr. Speaker, the Mile Gully High School, members. Mr. Speaker, the Mile Gully High School is the only high school in the constituency of Northwest Manchester, with a capacity of 730 students. A school plant of 1,200 to 1,500 students is needed. We only have 6 habitable classrooms for the 730 students. 4 years ago, 2 buildings were condemned by the Health Department and the Ministry of Education. And let us not even mention the staff room, which leaks like a sieve. The bathrooms are not fit for the students. What we call a canteen is a joke. Neither fit for the cooking staff or the students. 2 makeshift classrooms were constructed a few years ago by teachers and students, with some materials donated by me as Member of Parliament, by the school and other interested parties. The infrastructure is not fit for a high school. It was never built for a high school. The original structure, the structure there now, Mr. Speaker, was originally built for the primary school. And the primary school was relocated to a skills training center, and the high school is still where it's at. I am again pleading to the Ministry of Education to look at the Mile Gully High School as a priority. We are desperate to hear something positive about our new school plant. Mr. Speaker, I've been trying to figure out the Ministry of Education's and the Member of Parliament's responsibilities when it comes to school infrastructure. If it is fencing, we hear, call the MP. If it is paint, call the MP. If it is canteen repairs, call the MP. If it is potholes in the schoolyard, call the MP. If the school is out of water, call the MP. If the roof is leaking, call the MP. And if the school needs a staff room, call the MP. Why are schools in rural communities treated as if they are not to be centers of learning for our children? Most of our school infrastructure has not changed over the past many decades. The classrooms are hot, the infrastructure is woefully inadequate for teachers to teach and our students to learn. And this needs to change. And I'm sure that every member of parliament inside here get the same phone call time after time when the Ministry of Education is the required, is that ministry that has responsibility for school infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize all the school boards, principals, teachers, and most of all our parents and students. Despite all the challenges, they continue to make the best of a difficult situation. The time has come to do better for education. Mr. Speaker, over the past few weeks, taxi operators and other residents have shown their frustration with the continued use of the main thoroughfare by trucks hauling bauxite from Mile Gully to our bauxite company's facility in Clarendon. The conditions of the roads, especially narrowness and when riddled with potholes, pose a danger to the traveling public, especially those who walk along the roadways. Mr. Speaker, I've had many discussions with the management of this bauxite company as far back as 5 years ago, expressing my concern about the prolonged use of the main roadway with their large and overladen trucks. And I have insisted that they develop a haul road to bypass the small town of Mile Gully, the Mile Gully Primary and High Schools, the S.L. Blake Early Childhood Institution, the Mile Gully Health Center, and many other businesses. 5 years later, no haul road has been developed. I even sought the intervention of the Minister of Agriculture and Mining. Mr. Speaker, let me make it clear. The bauxite company is not breaking any laws by using the main roadway. Various government bodies, including NEPA, have given them permission to use the Mile Gully main road all the way to Clarendon. My position, and that of many residents, is that the bauxite company should perform periodic maintenance of the roadway, including periodic debushing, while using the public thoroughfare. While we are thankful that the company may have delivered 2 greenhouses or 5 computers, I care about the safety of our children and all road users. I also care about the condition that the community will be left in once the bauxite company has extracted all the bauxite it needs, as has happened in many communities. The people will be worse off than when they found, than how they found them. We are not rich, but we will not be left poorer. The bauxite company needs to develop the promised haul road as soon as possible. I also urge the company to have dialogue with their haulage contractor about the speed and attitude of their drivers. They too pose a danger to road users. We will not relent until that haul road is developed. Mr. Speaker, rural communities are challenged by access to proper transportation. What do I mean by this? Communities are scattered far and wide, and residents have challenges once they come off a route taxi that must drop them off at their termination point. Then they have the challenge of figuring out, how do I get home, especially if they have loads with them? What of the problem is prosperity, making people's lives better? I believe in the rule of law, Mr. Speaker. As time passes, things will change, communities will change, and agencies should grow and change with our growing and changing society. Mr. Speaker, it is time that the Transport Authority looks at expanding routes in rural communities. They are quick to prosecute operators who go outside of their prescribed routes. The robots, or what we refer to as the white plates, will transport passengers from termination point to their communities. Yes, at a fee, they too will be held and prosecuted for operating without a license. Yet they are told that once their vehicles are seized, they will have to apply for a road license. Once they apply, that road license is given for a different route. In most cases, and in our case, Mile Gully to Mandeville. Not Mile Gully to Ballignor or Mile Gully to Johns Hall, which is where most of them are operating. Mr. Speaker, and why I'm raising this is because it's a 30-minute drive and an hour and a 40-minute walk from Mile Gully to Ballignor, but there's no prescribed route from Mile Gully to Ballignor. Yet we expect those residents to get home. Where is the justice? Where is the prosperity? I've written to the Transport Authority making suggestions on potential expanded routes.
Mr. Speaker, the member's time having been expired, I beg to move that it be extended by 5 minutes to allow him to complete his presentation.
The request is on the floor. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Mr. Speaker, I've written to the Transport Authority making suggestions on potential expanded routes in the constituency of Northwest Manchester. The authority had set a meeting date and asked me to reschedule it. Yet still, after years, no progress has been made on that new date. I am, and those operators are ready to sit at the table to see how best they can be regularized so that the traveling public and themselves are not treated with contempt. Mr. Speaker, it is a vexing issue because over the last few weeks, we have seen operations by the Transport Authority disguising themselves as passengers, traveling with these robot taxis, seeing the distance that these taxis have to operate. Then they come out and then prosecute them, seizing their vehicles and then telling them that they need to. Instead of them trying to carry the recommendation to the Transport Authority, who they are employed to, that there needs to be expanded routes, they find more joy in prosecuting these persons. Majority of these students here that you see up here from Mile Gully Primary and high school don't live in the immediate Mile Gully environment. They live in Ballinure, they live in Greenmount, they live in Johns Hall, they live in far out communities that they can't walk from Mile Gully High School or Mile Gully Square to their home. They have to take those, is to expand the routes. That's all we're asking for. And I've written to the Transport Authority for so long, but a couple weeks ago, they found pleasure in prosecuting some of these persons who are assisting the students and other residents. Mr. Speaker, as I close, we are only actors on the stage of life. All we want, all I want, is to ensure that I leave this world a better place. That I leave Northwest Manchester a better place. And that I leave my beloved country, Jamaica, a better place. This is my only mission. Mr. Speaker, it is a pleasure to serve the people of Northwest Manchester. But again, as I started out, and I will end now that the Minister of Education is in the house. Madam Minister, I saw the joy on your face when the member from Western St. Mary's spoke about his new schools and the many school infrastructure that will be taking place in Western St. Mary. I too would like to say thank you. You have mentioned the Mile Gully High School on multiple occasions. The time has come for us to get that new high school for Mile Gully and the constituency of Northwest Manchester. Mr. Speaker, it is the people's time. We are here to serve the people. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues for this opportunity. May God continue to bless Jamaica and my constituency of Northwest Manchester.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as we had indicated, I now move that you revert to the order paper and to have the Minister of Health and Wellness make his statement.
The request is on the floor. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. We will now move to a statement by Minister Tufton. Can we have the copies of your presentation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to just use the opportunity, given I didn't speak before, to also commend and wish the best of luck to my colleague, Minister of Finance, Nigel Clarke. And to my colleagues who are coming after me at this hour, I apologize for the intervention because I know state of the constituency is very important and special to elected members. But Mr. Speaker, colleagues, I have been on a break for nearly 2 months from this House, up until recently. And the circumstances are well known. Had an unfortunate accident, and I wanted to use this opportunity to give an update. My team and I, and subject to Cabinet's approval, on what has transpired during the course of that absence from this House. I want to ensure that we continue to demonstrate respect for the House, for the colleagues who are here, and of course for those we represent in public health. I must give God thanks, first of all, for his continued guidance over my life and to have spared me from this tragic outcome. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, I have a renewed level of respect for those who are physically challenged. One could argue the disabled, because I had that experience to be in that position for a couple of months at least, as a matter of fact, still recuperating. And it is a challenge in more ways than one. And as Minister of Health, I want to renew my commitment to helping that community, whether it's temporary or permanent. Mr. Speaker, today I want to give an update, as I said, due to that long hiatus. And as noted in my sectoral presentation, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of transformational initiatives that were taken on, have been taken on by public health. And these are guided by the 2030 10-year strategic plan that, among other things, seeks to improve primary healthcare delivery, to increase the use of technology to address the crisis of NCDs, improve the infrastructure through innovation, modernization, and new construction and rehabilitation, and to create sustainable strategies to mitigate the human resource for health issues that are affecting Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, we are well on our way to achieving that. And over the last 2 to 3 months, a number of initiatives have been advanced. And it's interesting, it wasn't planned this way, but yesterday, the opposition weighed in on the state of public health through its spokesperson, and a number of things have been said. No, I said it didn't happen for that reason. This was always planned. But it's good timing on their part that they commented, because some of the charges and counter charges that were made against public health and the servants of public health and the cabinet and government of Jamaica are quite unfortunate, not to mention the fact that they are inaccurate. A lot of innuendos, a lot of assumptions, some very extreme positions. And, it says a lot about the mindset of that organization if those words represent the mindset of that organization. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that our healthcare system has not been given the level of resources and attention over many, many decades. And in fact, the very member who leads in these conversations on that side himself in 2015 when he was president of the Jamaica Medical Doctors Association state, and it was carried extensively in the media, so right, that he as a surgeon had to wear garbage bags as personal protective gear in order to conduct surgery within the health system. I can say, Mr. Speaker, in 2015, that's what he said during that day. We took over in 2016, that no surgeon today needs to wear a garbage bag in order to get personal protective equipment to conduct a surgery in the public health system. And even if there's a periodic shortage, it's probably around logistics, not because it is not available. And so if you were to use that reference as a starting point, 2015 or 2016, Mr. Speaker, we have come a very long way, and the Jamaican people are a lot better off today. So when I hear the hyperbolic type of description around crisis and tipping point, Mr. Speaker, it really, to my mind, suggests a lot of delusional comments by someone or some persons who are desperate and are exploiting desperation for political advantage, which is very unfortunate because health is one of those areas that we shouldn't seek to exploit, as is the case, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, we have inherited a lot of the issues, but we are making progress. In fact, the largest investment in healthcare since 1962 has taken place over the last 8 years under this Andrew Holness administration. $35 billion in active projects being implemented, Mr. Speaker. That's not a crisis. That is looking forward and not looking backward. That is making progress. And I'd be happy to share some of the specifics around that in the context of what has transpired over the last number of months. So Cornwall Regional is a talking point. And I want to give a quick update on that. In phase one, the water infiltration that affected the building and caused the growth of mold, based on lack of maintenance for probably 2 decades before that, Mr. Speaker, this government decided to address in no uncertain terms. And so we addressed the water infiltration in the first phase. We repaired and placed in a new roof. Phase two, we have had to address the structural integrity of the building, removing components of the building and repairing the supporting structure that has been compromised by water. In 2024, we launched the final phase, phase three of the project, that is to realize the full rehabilitation of the building. This is being done, Mr. Speaker, in sections. The first sections of the building to be rehabilitated is the administrative block, with staff being able to be accommodated by this Christmas. In other words, we will begin to move back into that building before the end of this year, Mr. Speaker, in a phased way. And that's an achievement. That's an accomplishment after a lot of work. By April of 2025, the medical records department, the general stores, the dietary department, and the server rooms will be fully rehabilitated and operational, Mr. Speaker, hence showing the phased approach to rehabilitation. These areas are critical. This is a justification to the proper functioning of the hospital and are being prioritized to ensure that when the full hospital operations are restarted, they can provide the appropriate support to patients and staff in the facility. So this is a critical starting point. Mr. Speaker, I've also been advised by the contractors that the next section of the building to be rehabilitated is the accident and emergency unit that we hope to be fully equipped with new CT and MRI machines as a brand new amenity to support the work of the staff of the A&E. So we're expecting that by the end of the first quarter of next financial year, mid-year that is, the new A&E will be commissioned at Cornwall Regional Hospital, and it will be an absolutely brand new facility, including new equipment, Mr. Speaker. And I want to just segue a little bit about that equipment issue, because one of the comments that was made yesterday around equipment was that somehow this administration, this government, is involved in purchasing substandard equipment. Now, I am not sure where that statement originated, but I want to remind the opposition that there is a procurement process in law that determines how procurement takes place, including of equipment. And I want to reassure the member, because it may be a case of ignorance as opposed to a case of mischief, and I prefer to give the benefit of the doubt, that that procurement process was held through from start to finish, and we can provide specifics on that if necessary. But I want to advocate that principle, which resulted in the equipment, and indeed, most, if not all, of the equipment that currently are procured or secured or purchased for our public health facilities. We don't vary from that. So it's advertised, people bid based on what is required. There's an evaluation that takes place. It goes to a committee that is independent of the ministry ultimately, and a decision is made, and in so doing, the equipment is secure. Now, I'm not sure how one could leap from there to suggest that somehow substandard equipments have been made. And in that same breath, the assumption or the leap, the giant leap from a public procurement process involving equipment to a term rapacious capitalism is rather sad, Mr. Speaker. And you know, what's interesting about it, and it's not my job to be critical of individuals and their ambitions, is that the very same person who is advocating rapacious capitalism is the individual who left the public health system as an SMO to establish his own hospital, private institution, in order to pursue the market forces in order for his own livelihood, which I don't have a problem with, because unlike them on that side who seem to have a problem with it, we over here believe in the market as an efficient determination of how resources are allocated. And indeed, I go further by saying it's a dangerous posture to take, and the people of Jamaica should be aware, as much as the private sector and capitalism, his words, have its faults, socialism and planned economy is a far more imperfect and create far more challenges. And we're not going back there. I don't think the people of Jamaica wants that. Because I don't know if the member is suggesting that we should therefore now handpick and select who provides what services to the system. That is not going to happen. And indeed, it's against the rules so to do, unless in emergency cases. Mr. Speaker, we have now reached the final stages of the Western Child and Adolescent Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, the members' time for speaking having expired. I beg to move that be extended by 10 minutes to allow him to complete. Yes.
The request is on the floor. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Member.
Under normal circumstances, I'd read directly from the script, but I've had to be distracted by some of the comments that were made. No, yesterday. No, that's not why. But let me just continue in the interest of time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Western Child and Adolescent Hospital is on track to be opened officially by the Western Regional Authority by mid next year, between May and June. That's an additional 250 beds, fully equipped. We expect to hire in the first phase over 300 new healthcare workers, and that will become the only children and adolescent hospital in the Caribbean. That's not a health system in crisis, that's a health system that's moving forward, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased with the team and the work that they have been doing, including all the new equipment that will populate that facility. Mr. Speaker, when that is finished, just to respond to the negativity and the pessimism, it will mean that at that location, there will be 800 beds in 2 towers, 1 8th floor, 1 10th, and every single piece of equipment will be new in that facility, making it the highest concentration of hospital beds anywhere in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. That is progress. That's not a crisis. And I think the people of Jamaica will benefit significantly from this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2023, I tabled a primary healthcare reform paper that outlines strategic actions around modernizing our primary healthcare system. I'm pleased to announce that over the last number of months, we have seen significant improvement and modernization, in some cases, brand new facilities being commissioned. The Buff Bay Health Center, the Adelphi Health Center, the Port Morant Health Center, and Arcadia Health Center. These facilities now meet the new primary healthcare services standard that includes more services, more patients being dealt with, more doctors and nurses, Mr. Speaker. Another very important part of progress that has been made over the last few months. The University Hospital of the West Indies, we made a commitment that we were going to expand and reroute the Ring Road in order to facilitate a new building. Pleased to announce that over the last number of months, the contract was awarded through a competitive tendering process. And if you go to that location now, you will see the new car park being constructed and the reroute Ring Road under construction of a total of $278 million. Now, next year, the intention is to continue to market in order to begin the process of constructing a new 6th-floor building to modernize the University Hospital of the West Indies. We also announced a program called Operation Refresh, where we committed through the National Health Fund and the Ministry of Health and Wellness some $1 billion to upgrade and to refresh our primary healthcare facilities. We took the position that we need to enhance customer service. A number of those health facilities are already being impacted. Just to name, Mr. Speaker, a few, well, at least the resources, some $45 million has been spent, and it includes new waiting area, air conditioning waiting areas, more doctor's office, clean bathrooms, a kitchen, and in some instances, even a conference room. The Catherine Hall Health Center in West Central St. James was the last one I commissioned. And if you go to that location now, the people are happy. Not just the people being served, but the people working there. That process is going to continue, Mr. Speaker. Under the European Union IDB health system strengthening, a few weeks ago, I signed one of the largest contracts, a process that went through a procurement process, I have to emphasize based on this loose talk about corruption, that involved the IDB as well as our local process, with a value of some $930 million in member Warmington's constituency in Old Harbour, where we are totally modernizing the primary healthcare system for the people of Old Harbour and its surroundings. That's not a crisis. That's progress in the making, coming from where we were some years ago. In another few weeks, Mr. Speaker, we are going to see a similar groundbreaking at St. Diego Health Center beside the Spanish Town Hospital, as well as in Portmore, Mr. Speaker. All told, $1.7 billion or 10 million euros being spent on those healthcare facilities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, information technology. A lot has happened over the last 2 to 3 months because we have embraced this idea of technology being the critical part of service delivery, modernizing our infrastructure with technology. And just to remind this House that I had announced that Cable and Wireless had been awarded a contract to upgrade the ICT infrastructure of the ministry, affecting 104 health facilities across the island at a cost of some $8.4 million. I'm happy to announce that by September, as of September 30th, 88% or 91 health facilities are now equipped with internet access, Wi-Fi, and computers, Mr. Speaker. We have also established health data center that is housed at eGov Jamaica with a redundant relocation in the southern region of the island. This data center, with its current capacity, can support the technology needs of the next stage of health transformation. In other words, 91 health centers to date, based on the award of that contract, have been given all the technological platform necessary for internet access and for data to be transmitted from one place to the next. That's progress. We are modernizing our health infrastructure, and I believe, of course, that the people of Jamaica will benefit significantly from this. Health information system, we have 13 pilot facilities that are now being marshaled, Mr. Speaker. In fact, if you go to Spanish Town Hospital now or Maypen Hospital, you register by computer. The data is transmitted to the doctor's office. The doctor brings it up. If you are an inpatient, the data is transmitted to the wards. No need anymore for files to be taken from one location to the next. Increasing the time, lowering the time for serving a patient, and of course, diagnosing and treating in a much more efficient way. Mr. Speaker, that's not going back, that's going forward. That is modernizing our health system, which clearly those who are detractors don't appreciate, understand, or refuse to accept, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I could go on, but I'm watching the time. But we announced programs over the last few months that have been doing well. Our Second Chance Smiles. We have seen over 50,000 Jamaicans, after announcing that program, going to a oral health clinic somewhere in Jamaica, getting measured up because they lost a tooth or teeth, and the public health system have replaced that missing tooth or teeth with dentures, which allows persons to have a second chance of smiling, which affects their economic impact in life. That program is working, and there are a lot of happy persons who enjoy that program. The New Limb, New Life program, we have seen 71 Jamaicans at a cost of 32 million benefiting from that. And I want to really, and I believe members on that side are going to be happy because they tend to take claim for this relationship. But the Cuba-Jamaica Eye program, I went there today. I went to St. Joseph's Hospital, and I looked at the data, and I really had to bring it here and comment on it. September last year, not this past one, last year, we resumed the Cuba Eye Care program with a renewed focus and a restructuring. We have 17 optometrists or ophthalmologists who are here with their support team. And we have 5 local players, so 22 in all. Between September last year and September this year, that team at St. Joseph's and at the Kingston Public Hospital have done 21,822 case consultations, which includes retina consultation, general consultation, post-operation reviews. They have scheduled 2,936 cases for operation or surgeries. A total of 1,847 were completed, 1,192 cataract, some 773 cases had to be rescheduled due to particular issues with the patient, hypertension or so on, so they have to be treated, and over 1,240 diabetic retinopathy laser treatment were completed, 852 at KPH and some 394 at St. Joseph Hospital. Mr. Speaker, this program, and I'll close shortly, this program, with your permission. Do I need to sit again?
You may continue to.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, this Cuba IK program has come back new and improved and has resulted in thousands of Jamaicans benefiting. The ambassador is here, I can't see him unfortunately, but I want to just salute the ambassador, and I want the House to join me in thanking the people of Cuba for the efforts under this program. And I have not yet mentioned the fact that we have well over 400 other healthcare providers who are here in our hospital system. Well, maybe those who speak doom and gloom should recognize the success of the program, because they talk as if nothing is happening. Anyway, let me continue. Mr. Speaker, I want to close.
Minister, members, allow the minister to finish. He has already gone over the time. If you continue to behave like that, then he's going to take a longer time. You may continue.
Mr. Speaker, I want to just close by saying that during the 2 to 3 months of my absence, the team led by, of course, Permanent Secretary, Chief Medical Officer, as well as my remote access through technology, and of course the Cabinet of Jamaica led by Prime Minister Andrew Holness, continued on the journey that we have set out in public health. And, you know, it is, and this is an update of that, given the 3-month not being here. I want to thank the House for listening, but I think it should be a matter of record. But it is what it is, and I just want to say, we appreciate criticisms. I do. I have never frowned on a constructive critique of what is being done. At no point have we said the system was perfect. But what I will say is that the system is better today than it was 8 years ago. And I think those who exaggerate and get into this sort of extreme posture while accusing the men and women of public health, because when you talk about the procurement process and corruption and so on, it's not me you're accusing. I've never been involved in a procurement process. It is the same health workers who are involved in that process. You know, it really is unfortunate. And one must be careful that in seeking state power, we do not damage the very system that we are hoping to preside over. As unlikely as that is, the fact is, it is a bad thing. And so I want to just take the opportunity to say to the Jamaican people that we have challenges, but we don't have a crisis. And we will continue to build, to expand, and to serve all of the Jamaican people, despite the distractors and some of the extreme positions held. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Southeastern St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the minister's protestations to the contrary, it appears that this statement really was in response to comments made a couple days ago. Mr. Speaker, I want to start where the minister ended by extending my own thanks to the government and people of the Republic of Cuba for their continued support and assistance to the people of Jamaica. And in spite of your own difficulties, which we are aware of, you continue to support us in education, in healthcare, in sports. And we thank you for, on behalf of those recipients, for that. Mr. Speaker, I have a specific question related to Cornwall Regional. Can the minister tell the House what is the projected cost to complete the work at Cornwall Regional? He has indicated the phases that we're in, when we should complete it. Can he indicate the projected cost? And I would say, again, despite his protestations, the comments, the issues over the last couple of days, Minister, arose from comments you made, which the workers in the health sector took offense to, right? In relation to issues within the sector and what they perceived to be your passing the buck to them. That is how those issues actually arose, quite frankly. And whether that was intentional on your part, they reacted negatively. The JMDA, they wore black for one day in solidarity with their colleagues who felt they were being blamed for a particular issue at Bustamante. So it is important, words are important, whether we intend it to be conveyed in a particular way. It's important that those people who are on the line sacrificing under difficult circumstances don't believe that they are being faulted for issues which may be beyond their control. But my specific question is in relation to Cornwall Regional.
Thanks to the member for his questions. I'll be quick. As of now, I know of no variation from what has been discussed in the budget presentation in terms of projected spend. We have spent about 5 billion to date. We have not spent the 20+ billion that has been bandied about as a final spend. There is a conversation taking place now around taxes, which is not complete, which has to be dealt with at the level of cabinet, and whether or not some of these things coming in will attract a certain level of tax. But the cost, as of now, is still at the number where it was as a projection over the next year and a half or so. I don't have the specifics of exactly, but it was 20 plus billion overall, projected with 5 billion already spent. I just want to say that my comments, just to clarify, at no point blamed any doctor or any nurse for the challenges. And I can see why it would have been jumped on and political advantage taken of it, given the season. But that's exactly what happened. My comments were a frank assessment that we have gone so far as a government where we have moved a budget from 60 billion to 140 billion, where people don't have to wear garbage bags to the surgery anymore, as some have admitted that they had to in the past. Okay? And it is, and however, we need now to fix the people coordination of the system. In fact, I quote what I said. I said there are systemic challenges that are either linked to management or leadership, and we need to identify them and fix them. I tell you one other thing as it relates to that particular hospital, and that is this situation, re the air conditioning unit. The management, in fairness to them, had for 5 to 6 months, had a contract with a private provider to fix the air conditioning system. It wasn't a money issue, which is why I said it's not a money issue. The entity failed to fix the system. They had to terminate the contract at the end of 6 months and hire a new firm in order to fix it. So this is a case where management was willing and the resources were available and a contract was issued, but the private provider of that service was not able to deliver. And I can give you the details of that because I have the details. In fact, it's almost incredulous that what was being asked for by that provider, given the cost of that job. So we're going to have to find a way to coordinate to achieve the transformation that is really required. Having spent so much money in order to improve buildings, to get new equipment, we're going to have to change the way we do things. And I don't resile from that. And that involves management and leadership. And yes, there are people in the clinical area that have providing management, the SMOs in a hospital, and there are civilians who provide administrative management. They have to be part of the solution. But I never broad brushed the entire fraternity or accused any doctors of such. So it was a misinterpretation or indeed an attempt at mischief for political gain.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has said that we don't have a money issue. And it is in that regard I wish to ask. First, the Minister, are there any suppliers owed across the 4 regions? If you could just give us an update on whether or not all bills are up to date. You could also indicate, in terms of your maintenance budget, what has been approved for this year that was, you would have tendered a budget, and we would like to know whether or not that has been settled, satisfied. In relation to the University Hospital of the West Indies, if you could state how many of the operating theaters are in fact in operation, and why some might not be. I think those are my questions.
Mr. Speaker, Mike. The issue of outstanding amounts to suppliers is not unusual. Indeed, I don't think there's an entity in Jamaica in the public or private sector who either doesn't give credit or indeed where due dates are passed, where suppliers are not paid. There are, so the answer to your question is it would be folly to suggest that people aren't owed monies. The question is how much and for how long. And where it is beyond a certain point and it is brought to my attention, it is dealt with. I mean, I don't preside over this process in specific terms, but from time to time, it is brought to my attention. And that includes some of the very suppliers that we are critical of in terms of the refrigeration and air conditioning system. What I know is that the ministry manages some of those relationships and the regional authority manages some of those relationships. And the resources that are available for expenditure on these projects are far more today than they were 8 years ago. And that is a fact, as reflected in the budget, from 60 billion to 140 billion. As it relates to UHWI, I can't say how many operating theaters are non-functional as opposed to functional. As I have not gotten any complaints, and UE, I think, has operated credibly. What I'll say as a general statement is that operating theaters go down from time to time. Part of my frustration with the Bustamante Hospital for Children issue was that you have an operating theater that has a particular problem and a willingness of management to fix that problem, and that problem has not been fixed because the supplier failed to repair. And that is not the only hospital that has that problem. Victoria Jubilee has a similar thing at the ICU maternal unit, as well as sub-hospital in the A&E. So we have to find a way to get some of these private suppliers to improve their capacity and to be able to adjust their approach to ensure that when they enter into contractual arrangements, they deliver. Otherwise, the upgrades that are taking place may add to naught. And that is what I'm guarding against as the Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, just for clarity, as I understand what you have said, one is that there's no shortage of money to provide the requisite services and equipment in the system. Take that as such. My further understanding from the Ministry of Finance is that no agency is permitted to procure goods or services unless there's budgetary allocation to support that procurement. Against that background, no one should have provided services or goods to the ministry agencies and not get paid because money is there. If such a claim is made that they are not being paid, could you then provide to this House the current level of arrears for payments of goods and services in the ministry, given that there are certain periods? Provide us with that information for the sake of transparency.
Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of mischief in that line of questioning, and I'm not going to agree with those assumptions that you have made. First of all, I want to just clarify that statement about not a shortage of money, because in the context of my referencing what happened at Bustamante, there seems to be an interpretation that somehow money is unlimited. I don't think any government or any budget can support unlimited availability of funds, and if that was the interpretation, let me caution against that. What I will say is that these challenges around air conditioning and refrigeration in particular, as well as some of the others dealing with equipment, funds are available once the problem is dealt with, is managed. And that was the point I'm making. We have more access to funds now than certainly any other time prior to the last 8 years. Now, funds have to be directed based on priority. During COVID, a lot of those funds were directed to COVID. And I think that's reasonable and understandable. So that's clarity that is important to be made. Now, the question about whether or not we spend resources that we don't have or commit, I never said that either. So don't put words in my mouth or make an assumption. No, you said, or you can clarify what you said. You can clarify. What I will say is that, as you know, the budgetary process is scheduled in terms of how resources are allocated. So I can't tell you that X dollars was spent through a regional authority or the ministry, which is allowed based on the budgetary allocation at the beginning of a financial year. But because of how funds are released as you know, periodically, which includes also supplementary estimates, that those funds are not going to be available. It's a matter of timing and how they are made available. And I know you know the system well enough to know that that is the case. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we are taking a last question to the minister now because time has far spent. We still have some visitors with us, member. We still have some visitors with us that we need to move on for them to get out of here because we gave them a time and they have been sitting here for some other time. So please get to the question and let us move on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, it's not fair for you to ascribe your interpretation. The question I asked was very clear. Don't ascribe any motive to my question. We have been told numerous times at the PAC by the Ministry of Finance how the procurement process works. I asked you the questions against that background. I don't have any ulterior motives. They're very straight questions in keeping what government procurement process is. So I just want you to provide those answers accordingly. Can you, Minister?
In 10 seconds, Mr. Speaker, recognizing your time issues. I have to interpret the questions you asked, and I have responded based on my interpretation. I'm saying to you that the budgetary process allocates and schedules allocation. That is standard. Everybody knows that. And so commitment around those in terms of spend is a function of that. And in terms of payment, I would assume. But sometimes also you have emergencies. So there's a contingency. You have emergencies, there's a contingency. But what I'm prepared to say more often than not, now, today, based on my assessment as a chief policymaker who asked for reports, a lot of the fix in our healthcare institutions, equipment, air conditioning unit, and so on, is less a function of funds and availability of funds, and more a function of how the process is managed. And indeed, that management includes the supplier's capacity to provide the service. And that is something we need to fix. And that's why I spoke to the systemic failures, which we now have to correct in order to advance the benefits that the expenditure is providing for public health under this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Announcement.
Laid on the table of the House are the